All right, fix these hairs, they're a little wild. All right, welcome everyone who is watching on YouTube and Facebook and streaming with us on Zoom. This is our February candidate forum for the primary elections. So if you are new to Texas or new to the political process, let me give you a little bit of context. Primaries are where the Republican and the Democratic parties pick who is going to be running for a certain spot, an elected position, and those people then go head to head and they show off in the general election to see who wins the seat. In Texas, you know, we have a lot of 254 counties. There's 181 legislators that go up to the Texas state capitol every other year, and we also have federal legislators who work for us up in DC. And today we are very fortunate to have some local representatives for Texas state districts, as well as some congressional districts with us here tonight. I wanted to make sure everybody knew some important dates. So the deadline to register to vote has actually already passed. That was on January 31st. And so early voting is going to start on Valentine's Day, February 14th, and goes until the 25th. I encourage everyone to participate in early voting. It's very important that we get out there and that we vote. But if you miss early voting, don't worry. On March 1st, you can actually participate in the primary. And for those of you that are real political junkies, if you want to be engaged in the convention process, then you would stay late and at 7 o'clock participate in that process as well. So to start off tonight, we are focusing on the Austin area candidates. Typically, this is a forum that we host at the Flamingo Cantina, but very happy to be able to be here with y'all virtually today. And it'll be recorded and available for you guys to share with other people in the Austin area. We've got people from Texas House District 49, 51, 50, Congressional District 21, 35, and 37. And we also have a Senate District 25 represented with us today. So we have about a dozen candidates that have joined us tonight. And the first one that I would like to introduce is a Democratic incumbent, House Representative Gina Hinojosa. She's from the Austin area and worked on the school board previously. She's done some really great work at the Capitol, authoring legislation. And so I'd like to turn it over to you, Representative Hinojosa, so that you can tell people in Austin a little bit more about your position on cannabis.
Thank you. And I just want, for those who maybe aren't as practiced in lobbying at the legislature, I want everybody to know what a well-respected source Jax is on all things related to cannabis. Both sides of the aisle listen to her, and she's done tremendous work at the legislature, making progress on issues that we care about. This is my third term in the Texas House, and I am seeking re-election to a fourth term. I represent Central, Austin, Capital, Downtown, UT, and the Lamar corridor, essentially. I don't have a primary opponent actually in the Democratic primary. I do have a Republican opponent in November, but I'm happy to join you here today. I support full legalization of cannabis, to have it regulated like alcohol is regulated. I think that we would have not such trouble at the border, for instance, if we didn't crack down on cannabis the way we do. It wouldn't have to go through legal channels if we could legalize cannabis and have it sold as a regulated product here in our state. What we see is that at the border, a lot of the criminal activity that is happening, last time I checked, in fact, latest numbers show that the most drugs that were seized were marijuana at the border. And so we are enabling that kind of criminal enterprise to happen with our laws that prohibit it entirely. We did make some progress last session on medical marijuana, but not nearly enough. And ultimately, we will not make progress no matter what you see on the floor of the House, no matter what passes on the floor of the House. It is all for show. because if the governor is not supportive, it will not pass. The conversations around cannabis that happen on the floor of the House are, well, this can't pass because the governor doesn't support it. We are in constant conversation with the governor, and the Republicans who are able to move legislation on cannabis, and the Democrats who are in favor with the Republican leadership who are able to move it, are in constant conversation, and they know what will pass and what won't pass, and ultimately only what the governor approves of will pass. And so there we are. We won't make any more progress until we have a new governor. Thank you.
Tell it like it is, Gina. I love the way that you share your opinion. Thank you so much. And thank you for all of your support up at the Capitol over your 3 terms. I've appreciated that you are always engaging with us here in Austin and keeping this at the forefront, and working with Speaker Pro Tem Joe Moody, doing really great work on the floor. So thank you so much for joining us. Next, we're going to go to House District 50 with David Alcorta from the Democratic Party. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, David. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, thank you so much for having me today, and I hope everyone's staying safe and warm out there in anticipation for this weather event that we're experiencing currently. But yes, a little bit about me. My name is David Alcorta. I'm running for Texas House District 50 in Northeast Austin and Travis County. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll go into my general position on marijuana legalization. So I am currently a city worker. I work in the Youth Initiatives Office in the city of Austin. I do a lot of work with Austin area youth, helping them secure internships and apprenticeships to help prepare them for the workforce or for college, whichever it is that they choose to pursue. And working with area youth, I am very passionate about the issues that they face, that they're going to be facing when they graduate high school, that being mainly the affordability crisis that we're facing here in Central Texas. The ability to afford to live here is going to be a real challenge for the students who are graduating now and in the future. So that's why my policies are focused heavily on pro-worker policies, raising the minimum wage, paid leave, increasing unionization rates here in Texas. So that's always been one of my priorities on the campaign. But as far as my position on marijuana legalization, I'm very pro marijuana legalization, and Representative Hinojosa definitely laid out the aspect of enabling crime, organized crime, both on this side of the border and in Mexico, and marijuana being probably, as the numbers bear out, the largest portion of their revenue source as far as controlled substances. And I agree with her that I do think it should be regulated similar to alcohol, putting an age restriction on it, because I don't see it as more hazardous than alcohol or cigarettes are. What I want to highlight as far as marijuana legalization really quickly is its effect on communities of color. They have obviously burned the brunt of the war on drugs, and I see marijuana legalization as the beginning of the end for the war on drugs, as a great first step of ending the war on drugs. And any type of marijuana legalization in the state of Texas, I want to make sure that the communities of color that have been most negatively affected by marijuana criminalization have a stake in the burgeoning legal marijuana industry, and make sure that they're the ones that can profit the most from any legal marijuana in the state of Texas, and make sure that they are not kicked out to the curb when legalization eventually happens sometime in the future. So that's why I'm very, very passionate about this, and I think we have a responsibility to make sure that our communities, our Black and Latino communities, have a seat at the table once legalization is achieved sometime in the future. Yeah, that's what I wanted to highlight when it comes to marijuana legalization. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Equity is an extremely important conversation that we see is starting here in Texas and is happening in a robust manner in a lot of other states. In fact, in the last session, we actually saw some legislation to remove the barrier for those that have had previous convictions for cannabis possession from working in the medical cannabis space. So, of course, we want to make sure that we are being inclusive towards the communities that have been disproportionately affected by this very bad law. So thank you very much for that point, David. I will move next to, excuse me, I want to make sure I'm moving to the next one in order. House District 51, we'll start with Democratic candidate Cody Arn. If you'll go ahead, Cody, and tell us a little bit about your position on cannabis and how you anticipate making that come to life in District 51.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me on. I'm really excited to be a part of this panel tonight. I am a big believer in the legalization of cannabis. I think that it is vitally important that we take this step. I think that the war on drugs, specifically targeting marijuana, has been one of the biggest tools that we've seen to hold Black and Brown communities back and to continue this cycle of poverty and incarceration that we are seeing in the country, especially here in Texas, which is one of the leaders of incarceration in the world. I have advocated for the legalization of marijuana for a long time. I actually organized with Ground Game Texas here in Austin to help pass a measure that would take away marijuana charges for small amounts of marijuana. But I believe that we need to take it further, not just medically, but recreationally as well, given that there are no particular drawbacks to this drug. I also think that there's a lot of financial impetus that we can get from legalizing and taxing the substance. One of the issues that we see a lot in Texas is the ever rising property taxes. It's one of the reasons why housing continues to be unaffordable and the prices continue to rise every year. How do we do that? Well, we need to shift our economy away from relying so heavily on the property tax. And one of the ways that we can do that is through finding other taxes, such as through marijuana. But beyond that, it's also just a humanity issue. It is completely unjust to send someone to prison for a few years to anything from that to a couple of decades for finding some weed in their pocket one day on a street corner. We are focusing our entire criminal justice system on kids on street corners rather than folks doing actual harm. And we can direct those resources elsewhere. Here in HD 51, we are in the southeast corner of Travis County. It is one of the less affluent communities here in Austin. Much of the east side is heavily diverse. We have a very high Latino population. We also have a very high Black population, and we see one of the highest eviction rates here. This issue directly affects HD 51. We are seeing our residents incarcerated for these charges, and it's just incredibly unjust. So yeah, I am in this race as the youngest candidate. I have very progressive policies on this. I think that we need to completely legalize marijuana. I also think that we need to expunge the records of those who have been incarcerated for this crime, both for possession and distribution. And then, like David was saying, we need to move equitably in the space of how can we bring these communities along with us as we move forward. So yeah, thank you guys again for having me on and giving me this opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Cody. I appreciate you mentioning Ground Game Texas and the work that they are doing here to restrict the budget from being spent on any THC testing or for any police time having to do with small amounts of possession. It's very important work. You know, it doesn't change the statute at the state level, but it does stop the bleeding locally. And so thank you for participating with that, Cody. Also, I see that we have Maria Flores here. She is also running as a Democratic candidate in House District 51. So Maria, if you don't mind unmuting yourself and tell us a little bit about your position and how you envision enacting cannabis law reform in District 51.
Excuse me, do I have a 3-minute portion?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, you do, please.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Jackson NORML, for having this forum. I'm Lulu Flores. I'm a 40-year resident of South Austin in District 51. I'm an attorney and community advocate with over 25 years of legislative experience at top levels at 2 major state agencies in the state capitol, and over 30 years of being active in my community. At the Capitol, as Chief of Staff for State Representative Ron Hell, I helped draft and pass the first domestic violence legislation in Texas, resulting in the first state funding for shelters and the temporary protective order for victims. As the legislative director for the State Bar of Texas, I fended off attempts to deregulate the practice of law and won increased funding for the Texas judiciary. I'm a true blue Democrat with over 30 years working with the party. I block walk, phone bag, raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for candidates at the local, state, and national level as a volunteer and as president of the National Women's Political Caucus. My district has many challenges, and I'll intentionally address the issues of affordability, fair wages, food security, women's autonomy, healthcare, education, social justice, and basic equity. I will fight back against attacks on personal freedoms and rights, our children, and our environment. And we have lots of work to do. And as someone who supports personal freedoms and rights, I support the full legalization of cannabis for adults. It should be taxed and regulated in a manner similar to alcohol. This has been done in other states to pay for public education, healthcare, and other basic needs. Additionally, when we legalize cannabis, we should pardon and expunge the records of those convicted solely for low-level possession offenses, so it doesn't continue to affect jobs, housing, and access to benefits. In the meantime, we need to continue to decriminalize marijuana, which otherwise is one of the biggest and most unnecessary drivers of mass incarceration. And we must also expand the compassionate use program to allow the access to full spectrum of medical cannabis with physicians making the dosing decisions. I hope you'll join Representatives Cole, Israel Hinojosa, Howard, Senator Sarah Eckhart, the AFL-CIO, the Austin Central Labor Council, ASME, Local 1624, Education Austin, and University Democrats, and all the other Democratic clubs that have issued an endorsement, along with many other local progressives in supporting my campaign for District 51. My extensive experience and proven track record of working with diverse groups in our community to affect change makes me the strongest voice for the constituents in District 51 in the state. So I thank you for your time, and I will happily answer any questions that you might have of me and my candidacy.
Well, thank you, Ms. Lulu. We are going to do some Q&A at the end. We're having everybody do the introductions, and then I'll circle back and we'll do a quick round robin lightning question thing for you. So we'll come back to that in just a moment. Thank you so much, Lulu and Cody, for talking about 51. We appreciate that. We're going to jump to the congressional districts next. So these are federal positions, people who go up to DC and impact our federal laws. So these would be people who would be able to take action on safe banking, descheduling cannabis at the federal level, therefore ensuring that states do not have to continue to criminalize it as we do here in Texas. So the first one that we're going to discuss is Congressional District 21. And first, we're going to invite Democratic candidate Coy Branscum to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you envision having these conversations up in DC. It's extremely important. Go ahead and take it away, Coy.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Legalization at the federal level is actually one of my main priorities heading into Congress. I think it's long past time we get this done. 18 states have already fully legalized it, with another 18 having legalized it for medical use. And I believe of those, there's 5 that are on a watch list for likely full legalization this year, including, I think, Rhode Island and can't read my own chicken scratch, another state that I can't read. And then there's only two states have no legal usage of any kind, and that's Idaho and Nebraska. I mean, the writing is on the wall. This is a one fight in my mind. We just need to rally and get it done and give the American people a win that we so desperately need. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, the Department of Agriculture right now can't track the yields or prices or crop values for marijuana, but luckily we have nonprofits doing that are showing that marijuana is the 5th most valuable crop in the United States, and it's only beaten by corn, soybeans, hay, and wheat. I mean, that is a huge deal. And we've seen that we can raise billions of dollars off of taxing this and regulating it. I mean, that is money that we could be reinvesting into communities, ensuring that we provide, especially for lower income communities and communities with people of color who are being primarily targeted by, frankly, draconian laws. And we can work more on preventative measures to ensure that these school to prison pipelines go away and that kids they have a safe place to go, regardless of whether or not their parents are working full time or whatever reason is keeping them out of the home. I mean, it just feels like there's so much social equity to be gained from this, and so much justice that we can achieve by what feels like such a simple piece of legislation. And honestly, I mean, I'm going to fight like hell to make it happen because I believe so deeply in it. As a former high school teacher, I can tell you that these kids, it does not matter what you teach them in school, they are doing drugs and they are having sex. And I honestly I'm going to fight for legislation that allows us to make sure that they're going to do things safely and make sure that we're not getting, you know, potentially dangerous product from across the border that's laced with whatever you can imagine. And honestly, making our community safer as well, because we're, I think it was Representative Hinojosa that said we're curbing the flow from the border. We're taking that money away from illegal sales and putting it back into the pockets of the American people. I mean, I could go on for days about all the amazing things that we can do, but we have to get Republican and independent support for that. And I think if we really focus on the financial benefits of legalizing this drug, we're going to win them over. And I'm ready to have those conversations and dig in with people that might disagree with me and get them on our side and get this done. It is long overdue. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Coy. And, you know, it's something that we see that polls very popularly, not only across America, but in Texas. You know, in Texas, over a majority, I think it was 61% of Texans want to see a regulated adult use cannabis market, because we know that drug dealers do not ID, but licensed businesses do. And therefore, we see in states where there are these regulated adult use markets that teen use stagnates and sometimes even drops. So definitely whenever people want to use any type of boogeyman arguments, we can look at the data and see that actual regulated markets are the best avenue for us. Thank you so much, Coy. Also in Congressional District 21, the other Democratic candidate is Claudia Zapata. If you would take over, Claudia, please tell us all about your views about cannabis.
Yes, will do. Well, thank you all so much for having me. My name is Claudia Zapata, running in Texas's 21st Congressional District against Chip Roy. Just a little bit quick background about myself. I come from a line of hardworking Tejanos here in Austin and in South Texas, Kyle, Kerrville, Bernie, San Antonio, you name it, my family's somewhere there. And on top of that, I am currently a community organizer, also a former legislative aide at the Texas Capitol during the 84th and 85th legislative sessions for House District 46. And I was a workforce and budget analyst at the Texas Health and Human Services Commission for the last 4 years. And I preface that in order to help better explain how it is that I think we should really tackle and discuss cannabis legalization. So as a workforce and budget analyst, first and foremost, I know that what drives people and what motivates folks are jobs and money, right? How can you make money and how can you put food on the table? Research has shown that legalization of cannabis in Texas would create new tax revenue of up to $500 million. And that's just an estimate. I think it would be probably double that amount if you give it some time. And on top of that, it could create up to 40,000 new jobs. Those are jobs that do not exist currently that we would be able to create. And on top of that, we could have them be good federal union-backed jobs as well. In a district that is primarily rural, Texas 21st District is primarily rural, filled with tons of small and mid-sized farmers. And so we need to be able to empower folks and really help them get into this burgeoning momentum of cannabis legalization and having their own businesses and being able to grow it, dispense it, market it, research it. But all of that starts with first descheduling it. We need to deschedule, remove it from the Controlled Substances Act. We also need to make sure that we expunge records for nonviolent cannabis related offenses. And then we also need to make sure that we address the equity portion of allowing minority-owned businesses to take a really big part in help leading the way and making the most out of cannabis legalization. So I know that once elected to Congress and if elected to Congress, I would love to introduce legislation that creates a program within the Department of Agriculture that prioritizes subsidizing minority-owned cannabis businesses and helping them get off the ground. They're a group that has historically been affected. Here in Hays County, which is where I currently live, Black men and women are 4 times more represented than their actual population in Hays County Jail just for cannabis possession. And that is going to be their highest charge. So we're talking like very low level misdemeanors. They're sitting in jail all for, having a joint or less than 2 ounces on them. And so I'm very proud, just as Cody had mentioned, to have worked with Ground Game Texas in Austin to go ahead and decriminalize it and end no-knock warrants. And I'm very happy to also be working with Ground Game Texas and Mano Amiga in San Marcos to also decriminalize it. I really do think that we have the opportunity to make money, make better jobs, and help solve and start giving our reparations for a long history of overrepresentation of brown and Black people in jail due to having cannabis on them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claudia. I want to give a little bit of context to whenever you're talking about the racial disparity having to do with those being arrested and facing those collateral consequences for the convictions and the charges. Here in Texas is actually where the first law to outlaw the personal possession of cannabis was written, and that was in El Paso. It was 1913, 1915 when they authored that law, and you'll look throughout all of Texas statute, it's actually spelled marijuana with an H because it was actually to target Mexico-American and immigrant workers and to try to marginalize them from participating in many of the civic activities happening in El Paso. So whenever people talk about the racist undertones of prohibition, I want to just state that it is in fact codified in law with the misspelling of the word. So just a little bit of texture there for you. Now, before I go to the next Congressional District 35, I want to jump back real quickly to House District 50. I noticed that Representative James Talarico was able to join us. Representative Talarico, I know you had some crazy weather you were dealing with. So thank you. I want to turn it over to you. And FYI, I just moved and now I'm in your district.
Oh,
so
well, that's
you'll
great.
be on my ballot.
That's great. That's great to hear. And yeah, I was out knocking on some doors and got caught in the rain. So I apologize for being late. But so happy to be here and so thankful to be talking about such an important issue for our state and for our country. So my name is James Talarico. I have the honor of serving as state representative for House District 52, based in Round Rock. But now I'm running for re-election in the neighboring House District 50 because I am one of the only Democrats who got gerrymandered out of the Texas House by the Republican majority. And so first, I just want to thank everyone who is involved here in Travis County for welcoming me back here. I'm so excited to be running in the district where I grew up and in the district that helped raise me. And also want to thank everyone for their help during the last 2 terms. Because of many of you, I was able to pass the most progressive legislation of any lawmaker last year. And that included a cap on insulin costs, a ban on reality TV policing, and bills that will disrupt the school to prison pipeline. Those are bills that we passed into law, but I'm really happy to say that we also proposed bills that didn't make it through the Republican majority, but were still really important to introduce. And so one of those was a bill to legalize cannabis in the state of Texas, to expunge all past marijuana convictions and reinvest the new tax revenue into early childhood education, which is a cause that I'm really passionate about as one of the only educators in the Texas legislature. And so very happy to help lead on this issue and will continue to do so. I have the honor of serving as the youngest member of the Texas Ledge, and this issue in particular for young people is one that is turning into an organizing force in electoral politics. And so very thankful for the work that groups like Ground Game and others are putting in to not only advance our policy interests on this issue, but also advance our political interests. So happy to be here. Looking forward to taking questions. Again, sorry for being late, and thanks for fitting me in.
No, I can hear the rain on my window right now, and I know that if our people in Austin that are watching, they know that we're going to have some sleet and some ice tomorrow, so it's going to be a little wild. I really appreciate you making the time to be with us, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Going back to the congressional districts, I'm going to go to Congressional District 35, and we have Bill Condict. He's running on the Republican ticket. And Bill, if you would tell us a little bit about how you envision taking cannabis law reform to the federal level.
Well, thank you, first of all, for holding this forum, and thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Up to this point, I appear to be the unicorn as the only Republican in here.
You had one other friend, but they had to cancel, unfortunately.
No, first of all, I believe that marijuana should have never been on Schedule 1 anyways. It's a natural plant that you find in nature. If you want to go out and dry it out and smoke it, and have at it. I don't believe the government should be dictating what we're allowed to put into our bodies, or what we have to put into our bodies, or what we don't put into our bodies. And marijuana is one of those things that I believe is, other than the munchies, doesn't have very many negative effects to it. It has a great medicinal value from what I've read. At the federal level, I think that's probably that's the best starting point for it. The states obviously are taking their own action on it, and the federal government's pretty much letting them have their run, but it really needs to be taken off of there. The benefits of it, some of the stats I looked at, there's $3.6 billion spent on marijuana arrests every year. There are close to 40,000 people incarcerated as of last year because of marijuana related infractions. Approximately 600,000 arrests per year. And like some of the other people who have already spoken, you take the criminal element out of it. Therefore, you decrease smuggling efforts across the border. I read an article, it was just like 7 days ago, they caught over 600 pounds. They seized over 600 pounds from the southern border. Those police resources could be reallocated to more serious crimes where they're needed, instead of wasting their time chasing down marijuana. That would allow us also to increase the ability, or increase the revenue tax-wise, as Claudia mentioned. I saw an estimate of approximately 400 million that could be raised in taxes by regulation and taxation. And you get the increased safety aspect of it, right? If it's regulated by the FDA, then you're pretty sure that the marijuana you're getting is marijuana, and it's not laced with something like fentanyl or some other crazy product like that. I think it should be regulated like alcohol and tobacco. Probably, I would say that legal age should probably be 21, but I'd have to look into that a little bit more to see where I'd fall on that. Driving under the influence obviously would carry the same ramifications as driving under the influence of alcohol. But the biggest thing I think is it's a personal choice, and I'm a big advocate of personal freedom and personal liberty.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Condict. That is refreshing to hear you definitely reiterate a lot of the things that we believe and understand to be the case as, you know, a consumer and patient advocacy group. It's an extremely important conversation to have, and I know that there's a lot of bipartisan support, even though people may not see eye to eye on every single aspect of the issue. So thank you very much for your thoughts on that. And we're going to go to Congressional District 37 next. And first, I'll start with Democratic candidate Donna Imam. If you would go ahead and take it away, you've got 3 minutes to tell us a little bit about your position on cannabis and how would you try to change the laws at the federal level to have a positive impact on your fellow Texans.
Yes, thank you so much. So my name is Donna Imam. I'm a computer engineer with an 18-year career here in Austin, Texas. I'm an active volunteer and I led a nonprofit, which I built to a 4,000 member nonprofit that provides completely free training and education to anyone to help boost careers and paychecks. And I've lived in Texas's 37th district for over 15 years. We've talked a lot about marijuana policy, stats, et cetera. And I think, it's very important to say that we're in agreement here, right, with the basics. So let's talk about what is our strategy to get these things done in Congress. 95% of the population growth in Texas in the last decade was of Hispanic, Black, and Asian Americans. So for the first time in decades, Austin has an opportunity to send a new representative, okay, that will champion things like Medicare for all, single-payer healthcare covering everybody, improving the quality of care with more nurses and doctors and preventative care. It's an opportunity to send someone who will organize and champion the elimination of student loan debt, debt-free education, not just college, but trade certifications, apprenticeships, and someone who will champion equal justice for all, which is on my website. It's a white paper, 2-minute read, votefordonna.com, which advocates for descheduling, marijuana, federally legalizing marijuana, and expunging all nonviolent marijuana-related convictions, period. So we're all on the same page. But what we saw in 2021 was that when we tried to pass Build Back Better, we saw it get gutted in the House, okay? So expanding Medicare to include dental, gutted. 2-year free community college, gutted. Things about lowering the cost of prescription drugs, extremely popular, gutted. We need people in Congress that are strategic, that will get things delivered. We need people to write bills that not just pass in the House, because passing a bill in the House doesn't do anything for the American people. So you can have all these people make promises, that's what I want to do and fight for, but who's going to create bills that the Senate is also going to stamp yes and get them passed? In Congress, I would build consensus and negotiate with the Senate to ensure that bills like Equal Justice for All on my website actually pass, not just in the House, but in the Senate. And that's where I think, as we send people to Congress, you have the power in a primary to make the decision for the people who are actually going to do the work and deliver on the solutions. And I want to end with this. In 2020, I was the Democratic nominee in my district in North Austin. We got the highest voter turnout in the history of the district, and we led all of Texas, #1 in voter turnout in Williamson County, among the top 25 most populated counties. Now, why does that matter? Because every single race will probably go red or blue because of gerrymandering. And so it is important for us to win statewide races. If you want to bring these solutions for marijuana legalization in Texas, right? So we have to win statewide races. And the way we do that is by winning and getting out every single voter to come vote that support these policies. And that's why I believe that we're the campaign that can get it done. And I hope that your viewers will not just watch this, but will go out and text their friends and tell them to come out and vote in the Democratic primary to choose representation for Austin for the first time that aligns with the constituents and the people who live in Austin. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you so much, Donna. I love your enthusiasm. I'm here for it. And you made me think of something, talking about insurance coverage. Medical cannabis is not covered by prescription coverage on different medical insurances. And there was some legislation that my previous legislator, Representative Busey, had authored to allow state employees to have their medicine covered. And so it's some of these nuanced kind of conversations where cannabis can touch so many different policy topics in our life. So thank you very much for bringing a little bit more to light on that. Next, we have a Senate district, a Texas Senate District 25. And today, Robert Walsh is being represented by his campaign manager, David Barrow. I apologize if I said the last name wrong, but David, if you would take it away and tell us a little bit about how Mr. Walsh stands on this position in Senate District 25.
It's funny that everybody's kind of talking about rookies in the beginning because, man, we are certainly that. We support any legislation that legalizes any sector of the cannabis industry. Decriminalization is incredibly important. I just don't see any way that it shouldn't be legalized. I mean, honestly, we're kind of jumping into very deep waters in this district, and gerrymandering's kind of been a thing, and that's kind of why we jumped in this game. It's an interesting time in Texas, and maybe by the influx of new people into this state, we can kind of stem the tide, so to speak. But there's no reason that the cannabis industry is incredibly important. I personally, and Robert as well, got to watch my daughter grow up in Colorado with her mom. And as soon as it was decriminalized and basically put for profit, the schools absolutely changed. It was pretty incredible seeing the influx of money into the school system. And hopefully in the state of Texas, that doesn't go the way of the lottery from when I was younger in my days. So we support anything that gets this ball moving forward, and we are rookies, so that'll be the end of that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. And I need to say I am so sorry, but I accidentally skipped a candidate. Chris Jones from Congressional District 37 on the Democratic ticket. I apologize, sir. If you don't mind, I would love to give you your 3 minutes to tell us a little bit about how you stand on cannabis and what you want to do in your district.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much, and no worries about skipping it. I know it's not easy running these forums. There's a lot of candidates and a lot going on. So first, I just want to say thank you all so much for your time today and allowing us to speak about this issue, because I know it's important to not only everyone in this group, but a ton of people across Texas. So thank you for giving us the platform to be able to talk about our campaigns and talk about these issues. I agree with what Donna said in the previous video about Texas 37. When we look at Congress currently, there are a lot of bills that get put into the House and things get slashed and taken out of those bills, and it's very unfortunate. And I agree, it is time that with this new district, District 37, that we give Austin a voice, particularly someone who is going to go to Congress, who is going to renew our focus and our passion and our urgency for progressive values. And legalizing marijuana is one of those progressive values that we have to find the compromise with the side of the aisle, and we have to get this passed. I know this is kind of like screaming into an echo chamber, right? I think we're all kind of on the same page about why it's important, but I have 4 areas that I really want to talk about and why this is important to me. The first of those is the fact that my campaign's focused on bringing equity to our institutions, and a central theme of that is bringing equity to our criminal justice system. And as we've mentioned already on this call, we know that the war on drugs, and particularly marijuana, is used as an excuse to incarcerate people of color all across this country, and it disproportionately impacts people of color. And so we have to bring equity into our criminal justice system. So a central tenet of my plan for reforming criminal justice is the full legalization of marijuana. And also a step further, recreational drug use. The part about decriminalizing recreational drug use is because I am from a family that's been touched by addiction, and I know that we overly criminalize drug possession, not just for marijuana, but other drugs as well. And I truly believe in a criminal justice system that focuses on rehabilitation, because I've seen where that works and how people come out of the other side as really productive members of society. So that is part of my platform for criminal justice reform. Also, I do believe in expunging the records and releasing inmates who have minor drug offenses as well. The second tenet, which is also touched on, is about security. Not only our border security, because legalizing marijuana will be disrupting this across our border, providing more security, but also security for our communities. I think it was mentioned, I apologize, I don't remember who mentioned it before, but making sure that this is a practice regulated federally so we know that it's safe for our communities. Right now, there's just no oversight in too many states and too many communities. Security is absolutely paramount in this fight. The third one is, of course, the medical benefits. And I absolutely do believe that cannabis being used for medicinal purposes should be covered by your healthcare plan. And I think that we can get there through other healthcare measures like pushing for a Medicare for All plan, which is, again, a progressive value that we need to renew that focus and urgency on. And the last tenet here is the economy, how taxes are really important. We talk about the job creation and the money that this can bring into our communities. We also need to go a step further, and we need to work on banking regulations as well to protect cannabis growers and other distributors across the country from having their bank accounts seized, even if it is legal. We see this in other industries. A prime example is actually in the adult film industry. There are many companies that have trouble banking because even though this industry is perfectly legal, there are banks that act as advocates, and we need more legal protections in the marijuana industry to protect against those actions that are happening in other industries, because inevitably it will come regardless of the legalization. So that is where I stand. Sorry, I was trying to get that out as quickly as possible. Again, thank you so much for everyone being here today, and we can't wait to see you all out at the polls for early voting.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. So if Stephen, if you don't mind bringing everybody on screen, we'll do our lightning round Q&A to close it out. We've gotten some great questions off of the feed that we've got out here. And let's see, the first question is, Stephen, it's not on group mode for me. If you can edit that, that would be great. So we'll start. This is a question for everyone. When Texas legalizes marijuana, what is your stance on limiting the number of available licenses and charging high fees for them? Essentially, this would lock out a great majority of people from the legal cannabis market. I know that we have seen that here in the medical market as well. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll start with you, Representative Hinojosa, if you would take it away, please. Let us know what's your stance on limiting the licenses?
Well, I think we would be lucky to have the problem to deal with limiting licenses. We're so far from that. Frankly, that's not something that I put much time and attention into. Essentially, we need to make sure we are electing leaders who are conscientious and moral in the handing out of licenses. We've seen some corruption from those at the very top in Texas when it comes to the licensing of marijuana. And so we need to make sure that we are electing only those who are leading with integrity. So let's start there, but I'd love to work with you all on that issue. I'd love to have the problem of trying to figure that out with you, but let's make some progress to get legalization to happen here in Texas.
Yeah, I remember you were in your first statement, Representative Hinojosa, you were talking about the governor, and even the governor recently in one of his press conferences misstated that he had decriminalized cannabis when in fact he had not yet. So, there is a lot of work to be done whenever people are still, getting fined $2,000 and 180 days in jail, and then this collateral consequence for their entire life. That's just not acceptable. Next, I'd like to get some more feedback on this licensing and the costs and the fees, because while that is down the road, it is an important conversation to have. So how about if we go to you next, David, and then followed by Representative Talarico?
Awesome. Yes, absolutely. I'll make this quick. I understand the need for licensing to make sure to protect consumers and make sure that the cannabis that is being produced and sold meets certain standards. But the only concern I have about the restricting of licensing is the effect it would have in potentially excluding, as I had mentioned in my statement earlier, the communities that have been greatly targeted, mostly targeted by the war on drugs, and have been affected by the mass incarceration that has resulted in over-policing of marijuana related offenses. So I want to create a system that allows these communities to have an opportunity to get in on a legal marijuana industry whenever that does come to fruition. So my first priority will be making sure that those individuals in these communities and those communities have the ability to get in on this industry and to have some type of economic benefit from it. And so that would be my priority when it comes to the way we license the marijuana growers and sellers. So.
Thank you, David. And for you, Representative Talarico?
Yeah, I don't have that much to add after what Gina and David both said. I offered legislation in the last legislative session to promote restorative justice practices in our schools. And I think this is an example of where restorative justice can guide our policy making. If, as Representative Hinojosa said, we are lucky enough to get to the stage where we have legalized marijuana in the state of Texas, and we have to think about how to license and regulate. I think we've got to, as David mentioned, always keep public safety and health at the front of our policymaking, ensuring that we're keeping everybody safe, especially in a new industry. But then I think we've got to use that restorative justice lens to ensure that we are recognizing the victims of the war on drugs and of these policies regarding marijuana. And then we've got to make sure that as we undo that harm, we're actively helping the victims, which in the state and in this country are communities of color. And so I hope that, striking a balance between those two things, we'll be able to forge a path forward.
Awesome, thank you. And then just last thoughts from the other state representative candidates. Let's start with you, Ms. Lulu, and then Cody, if you would go next, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely agree with everything that's been said so far. We do have to have regulation and we do have to have licensing to make sure that consumers are safe. However, I do feel that we have to have a fair and equitable system of distribution of those licenses, perhaps looking at our historically underutilized businesses and giving them first priority, or allowing for maybe some joint ventures so that there can be sharing of licenses, perhaps, that where minority businesses would be able to participate and benefit from this new economy. Any new economy, any funds that are available need to make sure that those, that they have high-paying jobs, make sure that we make them open and accessible to everybody. But I believe that, as Representative Hinojosa said, no cronyism, no pay to play in order to get your licenses. I think they have to be transparent, full accessibility to those, especially those underserved communities that have been the targets of, incarceration from these, bogus laws.
Thank you, Ms. Lulu. And Cody?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is an important part of the conversation once we do get to legalization. We already have legalization in so many states, which means we have a lot of different companies and organizers that are working in multiple states. When we limit the number of licenses right off the bat like this, we're really just opening the door for these larger conglomerates to come in and sweep the market in Texas. Meanwhile, the folks here in Texas who have already been growing, distributing weed are the ones who are already being victimized by our laws. If we don't allow them a piece of the pie when we do finally make that move to legalization, then we're leaving them in the dust. They are just once again victimized by this hostile law that we've had in place for so long. So in general, I think that we need to be very generous with making these licenses right at the beginning, and we need to be encouraging Texans themselves who are already practicing in this agriculture to continue doing so.
Absolutely. Whenever dispensaries look like iPhone stores and people are still in jail for it, it's kind of a little bit of a cognitive dissonance there. It's hard to compute. So now for the congressional districts, folks, I have a more federal leaning question for you guys. A real big topic of conversation that I'm hearing is talking about once we do deschedule federally, and that removes that, cannabis from the CSA, what kind of taxation structure would we see? So are you in favor of federal taxation? What kind of structure would you like to see there? And we'll start with the Congressional District 21 candidates. Let's have you go first, Claudia, and then followed by Coy.
Well, I think in terms of taxation, I mean, I know that currently, you know, states will tax it differently. So you're bringing in different tax revenues based on where you're at. So what's happening in Colorado is going to be different than what's happening in somewhere else. And so I really do think that, and this kind of brings me to the question of how much federal regulation and oversight do we have? And I think there's not a clear answer for there should be full and total federal control or there should be full and total state control. It's one of those issues where I really do think that we should leave it up to the states to be able to determine what that taxation looks like, because I know that if we were going to try to propose any federal legislation that imposed a federal tax on it, we would have such a hard time getting buy-in from a lot of these southern states. And so we need to make sure that whatever legislation it is that we do write, that we're able to really make sure that we're grasping all of our stakeholders and really getting them excited about it. And part of getting them excited about it is giving them some leeway on being able to control that amount of taxation. That's how you get that stakeholder buy-in. And so that's really, I think, key in determining you know, how it is that we move forward in regards to taxation.
Awesome. Thank you, Claudia. Coy, what would you have to add on that topic?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with Claudia. I think as we learn to navigate this new era post-prohibition, I think allowing the states the freedom to kind of sift out their own way of moving forward is probably going to be the fastest way to get full buy-in on legalization. Down the road, I think there's always a conversation to be had about how we could invest federally through the sales of marijuana. But yeah, I think let's just take it one step at a time and get people the justice they deserve and get people out of prisons. And then we'll talk about federal taxes.
Justice and then taxation. I hear you on that, Coy. All right. And in Congressional District 35, Bill, give us a little bit of your idea on the taxation idea at the federal level.
I personally believe that there's already too many taxes at the federal level. So if the states want to legalize it, and I think if the marijuana is grown locally and sold locally, the federal government shouldn't have their finger in the pot whatsoever. The tax revenues raised from that should be put back into the community from which they came. So either the local municipalities or the state government itself, I wouldn't sign on to federal taxation of marijuana.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go to you next, Chris. But one thing I did want to note, you know, to riff off of what you were just saying, Bill, is in California, there's actually going to be some bills put forth that will reduce the tax rate, because actually what they're seeing is that all of the high tax rates are making it more expensive than the unregulated market. And so actually, if we overtax it, we can potentially be driving people to the very market that we are trying to eliminate. So, but Chris, let me know a little bit about how you stand for District 37 and taxation at the federal level.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar mindset as everyone else here. I think there is some revenue that the federal government can take out of the cannabis industries, particularly around federal production licenses. I think we could do this similar to how we do gun licensing is a good example. There, you have to get a federal gun license to be a gun dealer. Now, obviously, it's a completely separate conversation, but we could set up a somewhat similar system for marijuana as well, a federal marijuana production license, and then collect revenue based on that. But really, I think when it comes to the distribution and selling and the commodity side of it, or the consumer side of it rather, that's really should be left up to states and jurisdictions. You did bring up a good point that I was going to mention, and that was we also want to make sure that we are not overtaxing, so it sends it back into a deregulated market, because despite legalization, we're still going to have some people out there selling illegally on the street, and so we want to make sure that we're getting people to the right side of the law. So that's a difficult needle to thread, but I think that is something that the communities will have to figure out as this gets rolled out. That's where I stand on it. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So I want to ask one last question for everybody to chime in on. And, it feels like, especially right now, political climate is very charged, very partisan. And so I think it's extremely important that we have a conversation about how we're going to work with each other across the aisle with people who have different ideas to create meaningful reform. And I think I'll go ahead and I'll start with the lone Republican tonight. Bill, how would you work across the aisle with others to make sure that cannabis law reform can happen in a meaningful way?
First, I come to meetings like this, right? I have an opportunity to share my thoughts on the whole subject. I believe that as a Republican, like I said in my opening remarks, that I believe in individual liberty and individual accountability and individual choice, right? And that's like a hallmark of the Republican Party. So if you are a Republican and you believe in that, then there is no reason for you not to support the legalization of marijuana. I can't get to that point. So I wouldn't have any issues whatsoever working with any of the people here in this forum to move forward legislation that would decriminalize and
Awesome.
expunge the records, the whole 9 yards.
Expunge the records. That is very, very important. I know that is something that has been difficult to get moving here in Texas, and something that actually the Republican speaker put on his priorities, and a Democrat authored the bill that he set for the priority there on expunction. So I did want to share that. Representative.
May I just want that first question you asked about the licensing? Okay.
Yes.
The licensing should not be limited. If you want to get a license for it and you have the money to pay for it, then you should be able to get a license. And it shouldn't be an exorbitant amount. It shouldn't be any more than if you want to open up a dress shop, or if you want to open up a car parts store. To get a business license is to get a business license. They don't limit those. Why would you limit this?
Agreed.
Well, I just wanted to throw
You got me, Bill. You got me on that one. I'm in for it. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. I will turn it over to Representative Hinojosa. If you would go ahead and tell us, you've had some practice up in the legislature, having to work in a bipartisan manner. So how do you envision that happening?
Well, what I always say, because it's true, is that real change, real progress doesn't happen on the floor of the House in the Texas Capitol. It happens back in our communities. It happens when activists, community members hold their elected representatives accountable. And so I see my role as getting information out to community, to empower community to do just that, because though we would like to believe it were the case, politicians don't act because the facts that are laid before them are reasonable, and they reason that they should act in a good way. They don't act because it's the right thing to do. They act because people hold them accountable. They act because they know if they don't act, they won't be reelected. And so I see my role as being able to put out information and empowering communities to hold elected representatives accountable so that real progress can be made. And I think, so I think that is, when you talk about bipartisanship, that's what real bipartisanship is. It's not about people being able to promise you that they can get things done on the floor of the House. Those are empty promises. That's theatrics. It's about empowering people to make real change happen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. David, how would you work across the aisle?
Absolutely. I think Representative Hinojosa is correct in saying that, in order to get something like this through, it's going to take a bottom-up approach. And I actually do have some hope in the near future that we will have some progress on this issue in our state. And the reason I say that is there is broad support for this issue among both the Democratic base and the Republican base of voters. And I think it's going to be incumbent on us as candidates and as eventually elected members to use our platform and use the platform that we are given to organize from the bottom up and to put pressure, sort of a grassroots pressure on both elected Democrats and elected Republicans in the legislature to actually act on this, because it is something that is one of the few issues where there is true grassroots bipartisan support among both voter bases. And then that's why I think I'm hopeful in the future that we will see progress on this issue done, because it is one of those, as you said, in the politically charged times that we find ourselves, is one of the issues where we actually have some real support along party lines. So yeah, that's how I would.
Agreed. In fact, we can discuss the merits, but as I spoke earlier, after the primary election day, you can stay and at 7 o'clock become a delegate. And those delegates affect the platform plank for the political parties. So if you want to see the Democratic platform or the Republican platform look a certain way, I encourage you to participate in that process as well, which it is quite a process. Representative Talarico, can you talk, you've also got some experience having to work across the aisle. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like in reality for you?
Yeah, I agree with the optimism that has already been expressed here about the future of bipartisan action on cannabis in Texas. Also want to thank Bill for being the lone Republican here. Part of this organizing work is celebrating people who sign up to support this, no matter what party they're in. And completely agree about the importance of organizers. And as a Democrat, I urge progressive organizers and progressive activists to pressure folks in our own party, because it's not just good enough to say the right thing on this issue. We want to see that you're actually campaigning on it and that you're proposing legislation to make these changes. And this work is intersectional, of course, and so I do want to shout out activists who I've seen do this really well in our progressive coalition, and that's reproductive justice advocates and activists. There's an organization called Avow on that issue, and they come to each of us as progressive candidates and office holders and make sure that we have abortion rights listed on our website and that we're talking about it on our campaign trail. I think we should take a page out of that playbook for those who are doing this work on cannabis and marijuana, and pressure folks on the left to ensure that we're not just getting lip service to this issue, but that we're actually campaigning on it and legislating on it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. Cody, can you tell me a little bit about how you envision bipartisanship and how you would work together?
Yeah, I think on this particular issue, we do have the blessing that it is a very popular policy. The vast majority of the voter electorate already supports it, and so do many of the elected officials. So I think that there's already ground there to exploit. But I also think that this is a policy that, even separated from the use of cannabis itself, has a lot of support among Republicans. It's a way to lower property taxes. It's a way to allow some more freedom of choice with what you want to do on your own time. These are policies that are also, these are perspectives that are also quite popular with Republicans. And I think that there's ground there if we're willing to communicate in that direction. But more than that, I come from a very conservative town, very conservative family. And so talking to Republicans is kind of what I do every day. That is my family. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us to come together on this issue for the benefit of Texans.
Awesome. Thank you, Cody. And Ms. Lulu, how would you work across the aisle?
Well, I haven't served in the legislature, but I have worked at the legislature for 25 years, and I have had the opportunity to actually work across the aisles. I understand that it's a very different climate now, but I think, as we've heard, this is an issue that isn't a wedge issue. I think this is an issue that can bring people together, at least across party lines, to do something that makes sense, that actually has an opportunity to have a win-win. And so on those issues, I'm certainly willing to talk to anybody and work with anybody. I agree with Representative Hinojosa that you do have to hold people's feet to the fire, and also with Representative Talarico in saying that, you've got to make sure you put the pressure on as advocacy groups to make sure that these issues are at the forefront and you hold the people that are running for office accountable and make sure that they are going to stay the course and do what they say they're going to do on the campaign trail and vote the way they're doing and introduce legislation. But I do have hope, as others have said, that this is an issue that can bring. I actually have worked on the arts and other hot button issues and managed to get things through. I understand it's a really different time now, but I do have hope. And I think there are ways to talk with people, ask people, and build relationships and try to deal with issues that have, common ground and work that way. And maybe they'll sow the seeds for some change. But anyway, maybe
Absolutely.
But I think that's right. I think we need to try.
Thank you. Thank you. I see Representative Goodwin just joined us, and we will get right to you, Representative. Thank you so much for joining us. Representative Vikki Goodwin, she knew that she had a few other things happening today, so she said she would join us a little bit later, and I will come right back to you. I wanted to hear from Chris and Claudia and Coy real quick in that order, if we can, about bipartisanship. So Claudia, I know you have some experience being staff at the legislature, and how could you use that to your advantage?
So I really do think that a big part of working out bipartisanship is also being strategic about how you propose your legislation. So something extraordinarily huge and comprehensive would likely not get as much support as these incremental small wins could get. So for example, if we wanted to pass legislation that just descheduled it, very likely and more likely to get buy-in, stakeholder support, more likely to pass, no issues, that sort of, those kinds of strategies in making sure that we're able to get these small wins where we can in order to help make some progress. And then we work out, the finer details when it comes to the things that people kind of get stuck on, which part of it tends to be the expungement. That seems to be a really big issue that can't quite cross over into the bipartisan side of issues that we have. And we need to make sure that, one, that we do really talk about expungement and that we get to that point where we do expunge our records. However, I also don't think that we should be holding up other large pieces of legislation that can start to make some sort of progress and justice available for individuals as soon as possible. So I really do think that a part of that, like I said, a part of that bipartisanship is understanding that you have to at times be pragmatic and take what you can get while you can get it.
Not letting perfect be the enemy of good. I hear you on that. Coy, if you'll go next, and then Chris.
Yeah, so I am the blue sheep in my family. It's all Republicans. So I share the sentiment of, I talk to them every day and I've gotten quite good at it. My family jokingly calls me the Republican whisperer. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown's work. If anybody knows her, she's a social worker and researcher in Houston. She has this quote in her book, Braving the Wilderness. She says, "People are hard to hate close up, move in." And coming from the family that I come from, I live by it. I have to maintain my zen. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. The only way we're going to move forward is together. And that means giving some grace to people in areas where they might have slipped up in the past. If we cancel people, if we shut them out for every mistake, we give them no reason to want to be better or to try to be better. And so for me, this campaign is about saying, welcome. I forgive whatever it is you think that makes you unworthy of joining us now, but that's not true. There's no such thing as too late for courageous leadership and courageous action, and all are welcome here. And I think if we can just be a little bit kinder and we can sit down and push through the rhetoric and get to the root of what actually matters in these conversations, and move past these boogeymen we've imagined, I think we'll make real progress. And I think we'll make way more than even we realize right now that we're capable of.
Thank you, Coy. Chris, if you would give us a thought on that.
Yeah, similar to what Cody and Coy said, I'm originally from Mobile, Alabama. So when we talk about our Republican families and that they run deep, that is true for me as well. In fact, my dad and I didn't talk about politics after the 2016 election. And then we started up again when I told him I was going to run for Congress. And one of the very first things that he asked me was, well, are you going to legalize marijuana? And that is not pandering to this group, I promise. He absolutely said it. And I was like, well, yeah, of course. It actually opened the door to this other discussion on all policies that I've had really great discussions with every week on. James said something that is absolutely true as well, and that is we have to clean up our own house before we can really expect to reach across the aisle and have a ton of Republicans join us. There are progressive Democrats out there who don't support full legalization of marijuana. There's one in the race for Congressional District 37. So if we are really serious about this, we have to lean on other progressive candidates and members of the Progressive Caucus in Congress and make sure that we're all on the same page. This should be a progressive value, a democratic value that we need to be promoting. But I do think there are rare opportunities between parties where we can foster relationship, and this is absolutely one of them. And I think to reach across the aisle and talk to Republicans, we have to focus on the aspects of legalization that they will support. Sorry, Claudia, I kind of disagree with Claudia that there's not some type of bipartisan support for expunging records. There is bipartisan support across this country and state houses across this country for lowering our rate of incarcerated individuals. And if we really want to have an impact there, this is where it's going to happen. So I think there are some strong inroads that have already been laid that we can follow here. And then, of course, every Republican's favorite talking point is always going to be the GDP and the economy. And if we legalize marijuana, we're going to see a boost to both of those. So I say lean on those two inroads that we already have with Republicans, and let's see what happens.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And on that note, I want to invite everyone to welcome Miss Vikki Goodwin, representative out of District 47. I appreciate you joining us today, Vikki. Of course, you have a lot of experience in the legislature, and I'd like to turn it over to you for a couple minutes to talk about, what has been your mission when it comes to cannabis? What have you been doing at the legislature? And what would you like to see in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. It's so good to see you again. I wish we were in person, but here we are. So you give me a lot of credit saying I've been in the legislature a long time. I'm in my second session. So
they seem like forever though.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I will say the two sessions have been extremely different from one another. My first session, I came in, there was some collaboration, there were some bills that moved, and then this past session, it just all fell to pieces, I will have to say. One of the things that I think that we have to do, and this is a really tall hill to climb, but I think that we need to allow citizen-led ballot initiatives in Texas. And it would require changing our constitution. But we see how things get done in other states is because citizens say, this is what we want. And the vast majority of Texans say that we want to decriminalize small amounts of marijuana. But we can't get it done. So we need to have that citizen-led ballot initiative. So that's actually one of the things that I plan to file a bill on next time, because not only in the case of marijuana, but think about Medicaid expansion. We might actually get it done if we had citizens voting on it. An independent redistricting commission, taking the redrawing of our political boundaries out of politicians' hands. We need that, but we're not going to have it unless we have citizens making that choice. There's so many things that I think would pass in Texas if citizens had the ability to vote on it directly, as opposed to having the middleman, the legislators, get in the way. So in my first session, of course, I voted for 3 bills that y'all advocated for: the expansion of medical marijuana. We didn't go quite far enough, but we did get somewhere. I voted for the legalization of hemp, and I voted for the decriminalization of small amounts of marijuana. You know, as we're all aware, getting a bill passed out of one chamber doesn't get it passed into the law. And so we still have a lot of work to do. One of the things that I heartily agree with is that allowing medicinal marijuana isn't the whole package, right? Because doctors still have barriers. There's a huge cost for them to be able to prescribe it. So we need to lower the barriers for doctors to be able to use this ability to prescribe marijuana. So we, you know, obviously we need to continue the work to change the law so that the possession of less than 1 ounce of marijuana does not result in jail time or a criminal record. And, you know, I understand that recreational marijuana really isn't different from enjoying some alcohol to relax and unwind. It can be abused, just like alcohol can be abused. You know, I believe in adults taking responsibility, allowing adults 21 and older to possess limited amounts of marijuana, and establishing a system in which it's regulated and taxed similar to alcohol. So that's what I believe in.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Representative Goodwin. It has been lovely to have everyone here tonight. I know it's kind of the end, so I did want to make sure that everybody knows that you can go to texasnormal.org/voter guide. You can check and see how our candidates have filled out. You can also see voting records. You know, Representative Goodwin spoke about her voting record and how she stands on the issues, and we've made sure to include those there for you as well. So I wanted to just thank everyone who was watching, everyone who's participating, and gently and lovingly remind you to make sure that you get out and you vote. So you can do early voting from Valentine's Day, that's February 14th, all the way to the 25th of February. Then if you miss those, you can participate on March 1st. And again, if you go after 7 p.m., you'll be able to become a delegate to your state convention and participate in crafting what the platform planks look like, which guide both the Democratic and the Republican Party in their decision making. And so I wanted to thank all of y'all for being here, everyone for watching, and we will be back next month at the beginning of the month. And I'm hopeful to see all of you that will win your primary elections at our a general election candidate forum that we'll be hosting in October of this year. So on that note, I'm going to sign off, bid you all adieu. Please go to texasnormal.org and check out our voters guide. And we also have an activist training guide to help get you involved and engaged as we build up to the next legislative cycle, which will happen in January of 2023. So thank you so much to all of our incumbents who participated and who have been active up at the Capitol, and all of our candidates who are out there on the campaign trail, really trying to make a difference in our world and in our state and our city. And if you are in Austin, Texas tonight, you are probably in for a world of an ice storm. So please be careful on the roads. We don't want to hear about anybody getting hurt, and we love our Texas NORML family. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful Wednesday night.